Hi guys. Okay, so it's time for my second interview for this month. Really wanted to focus on breast cancer awareness, and I want to highlight a survivor each week this month. And so this week, Lucienne. We go way back.
Very.
But we're only going to focus on Lou and hear her story. So I'm so excited that you guys get to hear a survivor story. Okay, thanks for doing this, Lou.
You're so welcome.
All right, so time frame, do you remember the date of your diagnosis or?
I don't. I remember the time frame because it was March 2020, where we had a little thing called lockdown.
Yes.
Yeah. So it happened at the exact same time.
Annette referred to that as COVID-19.
Yes.
So.
Yep.
March 2020.
Yeah.
And so, what was the process? Had you just gone for a mammogram, or did you know something was wrong? Tell me.
It was very interesting because I had gone in for my regular mammogram in November of 2019. Nothing showed up on there. By February 2020, I had found a lump. And so I was like, it's probably nothing because nothing showed up on my mammogram. But my husband said, let's go and get that checked. So I went in, and my OB-GYN said, it's nothing, but let's get it biopsied. So then she called and she said, I was wrong. It is something.
Oh.
Yeah. So that was pretty fast. Mm-hmm. So I didn't really, think of it as anything being wrong or anything like that. But so between the time I found the lump and got the diagnosis was about 2 weeks. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And the biopsy did they have to do more than one, like the biopsy and then lymph nodes, or did they do all of that kind of testing at once?
Yeah, they do it. They just do the biopsy at the beginning. You really don't know much about the lymph nodes, at least I didn't, until I actually went into surgery.
Gotcha.
But they do like a nuclear scan where anything cancerous is lit up. Mm-hmm. And so they look for something that leads to the lymph nodes, and they didn't see anything.
So what is the type of cancer that you had?
It was ductal.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's so many different kinds.
Yeah.
So what was the next step? You get the diagnosis.
So the next step is you get to see an oncologist, and of course, because it was the beginning of COVID, everything was virtual.
Right.
So you're trying to talk to them, and they're holding up your x-rays, and you're holding up your shirt on the computer.
Wow.
It's a very unusual process, but awesome doctor. He was awesome. So because it had grown so quickly, mm-hmm. and after they did the testing, it was considered a very aggressive form of cancer. They started very aggressive treatment. I think my first chemo treatment was probably the middle of April, so everything happened very fast.
So did you do chemo before a surgery then?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and everybody is different. They did what they call hard chemo. So it's 4 different types of chemo because mine was estrogen fed, so they have to add in additional things for that. And after 3 treatments, it had grown. So it wasn't responding to the chemo. And so that was really hard because usually I had a friend who was diagnosed exact same time, same type of cancer, same doctor, and hers shrunk.
And yours grew even with the chemo.
But I figured that out. So later on I'll tell you about that.
Yeah.
But so the surgery, the surgeon said, let's just go ahead and get that out. So after my first 3 treatments, they went ahead and took out the tumor.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So it was a lumpectomy.
So a lumpectomy.
Yeah.
And then do you have to do treatment after that now?
Yes. So then they have you, I think I did about 6 weeks of recovery, and then you immediately go back into chemo and radiation. Yeah. So it's kind of funny. People are the most worried about radiation, and I'm like, that's the easiest.
Right. So was your chemo weekly or
Every 3 weeks.
every 3 weeks?
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's very interesting. I love how they do it. I know that they've done so much research on the way your body works and everything. So after chemo, you've got about 5 days of just, you can't really do anything.
Right.
Right? And then you just start to get a little bit better. And then by the 3rd week, you're like, I don't think these treatments are that bad.
I'm good.
And then you get it, you're like, oh yeah, it is bad.
Oh. And did you, granted I know it was COVID, but did you work during this time?
Yeah. So I have an awesome boss, and he let me know when I was hired that this job was not a remote position, that I
Right.
needed to be in the office. And then when I was diagnosed, he said, work from home for as long as you need to. So
Oh, that's
it was really nice. They
So
delivered
that took
all
off
the
a
equipment.
bunch of
Oh, yeah.
stress,
Yeah.
no doubt. Yeah.
Yeah. Because that's something they don't tell you is how expensive it is.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
So when you first, like, now it's like I've got all these facts. Now I want to hear some feelings. Sorry about that. I mean, it had to be kind of a gut punch.
Yeah.
But, I mean, what was your process? What worked best for you as far as like going and moving forward with it all? Like,
You feel when you get the diagnosis and when you get all the treatments, things lined up, you feel like you have no control. You feel like your life and health is in somebody else's hands. So I didn't like that feeling. And I really trusted my doctor, but I still needed to be involved. So my way of doing that was just doing tons of research and, figuring out, not to like scare myself,
Yeah.
but to really find out what they think causes it and, what the rates of success are and all that kind of thing. So then I felt more involved, and then it was also an important step in my emotional process to not, you kind of feel betrayed by your body. You feel like, what? I've been taking care of you, right? So then I started to think, I really need to view my body as my friend, and I want to take care of it, and that helped a lot.
and your husband, I know he's awesome. What was his role in this?
He played a very important role because even though he wasn't present in a lot of my doctor's appointments, he was always on FaceTime. And what happens in a doctor's visit is they're going over your blood work, they're looking at progress, and inevitably they tell you something that scares you. And so you stop listening. I didn't realize that. By that point, you're just like, oh no, what's this mean? What is this going to change?
Right.
Because they were finding other things. They found something on my lungs, like all this process. So he would just listen, and he wrote everything down. And he had a meeting with the chemo nurse. So he knew everything, and I would say, I'm having this side effect and this side effect, and it's scary. And he'd say, that's normal. That's what you're supposed to do. So it was like he was my memory, and
Nice.
yeah.
Wow, very important. And I think that that's something that not everybody thinks of, but it is happening to you for sure. But it happens to everybody who loves you too.
Yes.
And then you have to deal with probably the feelings of that even.
Yeah.
So you do chemo, or you have the lumpectomy, move on to chemo, and then radiation after that? Okay.
Yeah, you're doing the chemo and radiation was simultaneous.
Really?
Yeah. So the chemo was actually what they call targeted therapy. So I did that for a year. So
A whole year?
Yeah. Yeah. But the radiation is nice because it's just like 5 weeks, Monday through Friday.
Yeah.
7 minutes, you go in and take your shirt off and leave.
So just because I know stuff, my mom and sister are both, survivors. Was that your first tattoo?
Yes. And I thought to myself, how are people doing pictures? It is so painful.
I don't know. So what are some things that you, like, not to call anyone out specifically, but what was stuff that maybe was said that was like, oh, that wasn't helpful, and maybe you shouldn't ever say to someone going through this?
Yeah. You know, I didn't think a lot of that at the beginning, but I did realize that it's sort of human nature when people want to relate to you that they tell you something.
Other story.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's usually they died, you know. And so I started to say, if this story has a bad ending, I'm sure it's important for you to tell me, but could we wait until I'm past this?
You're so nice. So what about, would the same be true, or if it was a success story, would you want to hear it, or did it just need to be like, I just want to focus on my story now?
It's a very odd thing. Like, I can relate to it in the fact that when two women who have had pregnancies talk, it's so different than if I am talking to somebody who has been pregnant and I haven't. Mm-hmm. So every conversation I had that really was beneficial was with somebody who had been through it.
Gotcha.
And so, you know, you love your friends and they're super supportive and they say loving things and all that, but it really helped me when people who had been through it shared with me. Yeah.
I know it was COVID, but did you join any type of support group, or?
You know, I had our insurance assigned me a social worker, and she would check with me every week, and that was really nice because so much of it is very practical. Like, what are you going through? How can I help? And then you also had the chance to talk about sort of the emotional impact and everything.
So then, what are, like, to give other people advice, even those of us who haven't had breast cancer, what tips would you give if one of our loved ones or somebody we knew was diagnosed? Like, what would be good things to say, or do we just keep our mouths shut?
I think the thing that really helped me the most was people being positive. Like, I think the people who got really scared, that was hard for me because you're already fighting that yourself. And they're like, do you think you're going to die? How long did they give you? You know, things like that. Just kind of throw you. No, and I think they're scared. They're really scared. And I feel for them. You know, I understand how that is. But I really loved it when people are like, you're going to get through this. You're going to be fine. You know, and I don't know. That was just kind of the hard thing, was when people came from a really scared place. And
Gotcha. Well, I think that's important to tell people. And in general, I know even just with grief, you know, from losing somebody, like being out loud and specific but positive is good. Yeah. So this treatment process and looking back, is there anything you would do differently?
I don't think so. Because it was such a journey. You know, when I look back on it, like when I told you that the chemo wasn't working. Right. So there was a lot of things I didn't know. And one of them that was the fact that my cancer was estrogen fed. There were certain foods, like I couldn't stand the smell of chicken and everything. So I was worried about getting enough protein. So I was eating like 6 eggs a day. And then one of the chemo nurses happened to mention that they call eggs baby makers because it boosts estrogen.
Really?
And I was like, are you kidding me? So my numbers, you know, they want your estrogen level at maybe below 5, and mine were up at 180. So the minute I made that connection and I said, okay, what foods are going to interact with this? By cutting all that out, within 3 weeks, my number was back down to where it should have been.
Really?
So that's the only part of the journey I wish I had started earlier on, but you kind of learn things as you're ready for it, almost. Yeah.
Well, that kind of leads into the next question of like how, obviously, you're altered forever with your brain and what you've gone through and all, but how has it altered how you live? Like, what do you do differently, or do you feel like you live differently?
I do. I do because I think that when you've been relatively healthy most of your life, you do kind of take things for granted, and I wasn't really listening to my body, and I thought rest was kind of like something that, you maybe had to earn after working 60 hours a week. And I started to realize the importance of really taking care of yourself. And so I just did a lot of research on what that would mean for me, how I ate, how I exercised, all those things that
You were always going
Yes.
before.
Yeah.
So do you rest more now?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, I actually book time on my calendar that's rest.
Good job.
And it makes a huge difference,
Yeah. So then you mentioned food. That's changed too then, how you eat now versus before. And I know, I just watched a video the other day that was it was one of Troy's, a connection of ours, and it's like how food science can really wow.
Yeah.
There's so much to know.
Yeah. And it's definitely a process because as you go through it, you look at certain foods and you just kind of do research and see what's indicated, and after I was considered cancer-free, some of my numbers were still up where I didn't want them to be. So I did extra research on what that could be. Alcohol was a big factor in it.
Man.
But it's kind of funny. Once you figure out that it is going to cause a good outcome,
Then it's easier.
Yeah, when I read that, I haven't had a drink since. So
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh man, I loved having cocktails with you.
I know.
So obviously you look fabulous.
Thanks.
And you've always been, into beauty and stuff. What part of this journey, did that affect, how you felt about your appearance and stuff? Did you lose your hair,
Yeah.
stuff like that?
Yes, definitely affects that because you grow up perceiving femininity in a certain way. And something that maybe people don't realize is that whole process for 2 years is very painful. Your body's in pain. You kind of feel like you're always protecting it and keeping it safe. So it's hard to just go back into feeling like you're feminine and pretty and you can relax and your body's okay. So that was one of the biggest surprises for me because there's so many side effects that are manageable, but overall you're just not yourself.
Yeah. And you're at the mercy of the beast.
Yeah.
Well, I love your hair.
Thank you.
Did it come back super silver like this?
Yeah. And I think it had been this way for quite a while. I didn't know my normal color. I've been coloring it since 25.
Well, although, I'm getting some peaks.
I love it.
But, I'm letting them be peeking there.
Yeah.
But I had another friend, and, she was in her 30s when it happened, her breast cancer, and her hair came back all white. So I wondered if that was more of a,
Yeah. I didn't know what it was going to come back like because when it fell out, it was platinum blonde. And so then when it came back, I was like, oh, I
pretty close. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's pretty close.
And I said to my husband, if you want me to color it, I'll color it. But he loves it, so.
Did you wear wigs? Did turbans, hats, or how'd you handle?
No, my scalp was so sensitive, I couldn't really put anything on it. And so I just was mostly, my husband's bald, so we made a cute couple.
I saw, and if it's okay with you, maybe a picture you shared with me during that, I can share with everybody else. You looked amazing. Amazing. I don't know. I think mine's kind of cone shaped, but it is what it is. I think you hit the, if you wanted to just do it again for fashion, I think you could.
Well, when it first fell out, it was very, white. So I definitely was fake banking.
Oh, I remember tanning water was your thing, right?
Yeah.
And it's more moisturizing than some, so. So, how often do you go for checkups now?
Well, right
Where are
now
you?
I'm at every 3 months.
Oh, okay.
So one thing I didn't realize is that when they remove the tumor, they do testing on it. And so my tumor tested very high for a rate of reoccurrence.
Oh, okay.
So that's why I'm still doing, taking chemo pills every day.
Oh, you
and,
do still? Oh, okay, gotcha.
For 5 years. And they do my blood work and CAT scans, bone scans every 3 months.
Every 3 months. So do you do a PET scan? Is that the same as the 3-month mark, or?
I think now I'm at a 6-month PET scan, but
Oh.
I'm still doing the breast MRIs every
Very
3
good.
months. Yeah.
And so then catch it, whatever reoccurs early, or
Yes.
then just nip it in the bud.
Yeah.
Right then.
Yeah.
Well, in my world, you're a survivor. Do you feel that way?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, even probably, I think I would categorize you as survivor even in the process. Because you were doing everything you were supposed to.
Yeah. I really felt that I was so fortunate to have such an amazing oncologist, and his team was awesome. And I would even see him with people that were not doing the things that he said,
Yeah.
and it was hard for him,
Yeah.
and I was like, I can't imagine what that would be like to dedicate your life to saving so many people's
then
lives,
and
they're
then
like,
they aren't paying attention.
I'm going to go outside and smoke a cigarette.
Oh,
that
yes,
kind of thing.
yes.
So, but yeah, that really felt good to be an active participant in it. And I remember one of the biggest things that the chemo nurse said to me at the very beginning. She said, do you remember when we had opposite day in school?
Yeah.
And she said, that's what your life is going to be like. For the next couple of years, she said, foods you love, you're going to hate. All these different things. She said, but you'll come back. You'll find yourself again. And that meant so much to me, because I would struggle with thoughts that I'd never had before, and foods I used to love I couldn't eat anymore, that kind of thing. But then I was like, okay, it's just temporary. We're going to power through it.
And get it?
Yeah. And then opposite day's over.
So then, this is October 22. So when do you consider like your anniversary date of like, do you wait do you mark more like when things were done? Because you're not even done now. Like, you're still taking your chemo pills.
I think the most significant day was July 7th of last year.
Okay.
That was my last, hard chemo.
Hard chemo.
And he said, your blood work looks great. We have every reason to think we've beaten this.
An upward
Yes.
trajectory?
Yeah.
Trajectory. Sorry.
Yeah. But every 3 months you go there, it builds more confidence.
Good.
Yeah.
This was super kind of you to share. I didn't know all these details, and I think the more people know, which is kind of, I want to just spoil you rotten and give you all the zhuzh you deserve and all of that, but I feel like it's going to be good for somebody else to hear your story because you're successful.
Yeah. It does. It makes such a difference when you see other people on the other side, because it gives you hope.
Very good.
Yeah.
I love you, girl.
Oh, I love you too.